Well, good evening, everyone. This is Johnny Henderson with Cryptid Studies Institute Radio, and with me, as usual, is my son. Hopefully my son is with us, Elijah Henderson. Elijah, are you with us tonight?
Oh, I'm here. See you loud and clear. How you doing tonight?
Seems like a while. Oh, yeah, it's a good night tonight, son. Excuse me. Seems like a while since we've been on the radio here. Some people wonder why we're not on every week consistently. Well, we made the determination a long time ago that when we brought the show back that we would probably do either 16 or 22 episodes a year because, you know, TV stations, they usually do 16 to 22 episodes a year, and that's plenty. We could do a show every week, but nobody wants to hear us get on here and just ramble. You know, we want to be able to bring you something, you know, and not just try to force an episode just for the sake of having something. Tonight,
right,
I'm excited about our guest, and we're going to get to her in a minute. But before we do, I'm going to make mention of something. Elijah, do you know what 2 weeks from tonight is?
Why don't you tell me, Pop?
That is the night we'll be coming back home from the Lexington CryptidCon. So we're really 2 weeks out, and we have got a lot to get done between now and then. We've got T-shirts that we'll be offering there at the con, and we'll have some DVDs and a lot of different things. So we really got to get busy and get ready for that.
And every moment of my time I'm using to get the DVDs ready. What we're doing is some people have asked for us to kind of compile our Nightmare Nugget series on DVD. So a lot of our older ones we're trying to rebuild from the ground up to make a more professional product, better material.
And then we'll have on each one of the DVDs at least one DVD exclusive that for one reason or another we can't post online, you know, to make it worth having the DVD. We're not going to charge an exorbitant price, just barely what it covers to make them. That way if people want them, they can have them, no pressure. But some people will, I'm sure, won't want to get one. And Elijah, I think that we should probably, if we sell anything, have a portion of the proceeds go to help the people of Harlan County. Now, my heart goes out to Harlan because we're from Appalachia, and Harlan is a big coal country town, and recently they had a mine go bankrupt, or it was foreclosed on by the bank, actually. And these people that were there, they're just all at once without a job. And from what I understand, even their last check bounced. So we're going to try to find a way that we can start trying to give to Harlan County to help those people in their time of desperate need.
Yes, I think that'd be a great idea because they really are struggling up there.
Now, without any further ado, I think we should welcome our guest. We are very excited tonight to bring you the queen, undisputed queen of the Dogman, and that would be Miss Linda Godfrey. Man, what a wonderful lady she is.
Yes, I'm extraordinarily excited to talk with her. Let's welcome her on. Miss Linda, are you there?
I'm here. How are you guys this evening?
Doing
very well,
Thanks
ma'am.
for coming on.
Great. And yeah, I'm not sure. I'm always a little nervous about being called Queen of the Dogman because I'm afraid they might take that literally some days, carry me away. But I'm more of a long-time student of the phenomenon, actually. Probably a safer thing to call me.
Yes, ma'am. But if there is an expert in the field, it seems to be you.
Well, I've been at it for 27 years now, I think. So if I haven't learned something by now, there'd be something really wrong, right?
I would think there
might be. Sounds like a life well spent to me.
Oh, well, thank you. It certainly has been interesting.
I would imagine that it has. You know, we, for the longest time, wasn't sure about the validity of a Dogman. We just was thinking maybe it was a misidentified Bigfoot. And
Mm-hmm.
last year, we met you up at Lexington at the CryptidCon up there, and we bought your books. And man, mine is so well worn and read over and over and over since then. It's just unreal. It is amazing. There is almost no chance that it's a misidentified animal.
No, not unless, I mean, every once in a while I'll get a message saying, well, there was a space in the leaves and I saw something brown with fur that was upright going through, but I didn't see the head and I didn't see the face and I didn't see the legs. Well, then you don't know what you've got. You know, there's absolutely no way to tell. But people who get a good look at the head, the long muzzle, the pointy ears on top of the head, the fangs, the different colored eye shine, the fact that they're on their toe pads instead of flat-footed, you know, the different build, they always say, I know what I saw. It was either a Bigfoot or it was a Dogman. And I've had Bigfoot sightings myself, but still, after all this time, and ironically, I haven't seen a Dogman, at least not that I could identify. And the only one that might have been was in that just glimpse of the upright fur, and I couldn't, you know, swear in the Bible that it was either one in that case. But they're very different in their anatomy and bone structure and everything else, the same way that a wolf is very different from, say, a chimpanzee or a gorilla.
Yes, ma'am. I could see that. Now, after all these years, do you have really a clue or an inkling what these things actually are?
Well, I've said from the beginning that they could be a number of different phenomena because there are different descriptions sometimes and different behaviors. I would say 90%, the great largest percent of Dogman sightings involve something by the side of the road that acts fierce, but maybe that is like a territorial thing, or that it may just run into the nearest cover. They aren't things that are physically killing people like the medieval times used to claim, or like any of the Hollywood horror movies. They just don't behave or look like that. And I'd say there's a good chance that 90% could be some kind of subset of wolves or wolf dogs or coy wolves, whatever, that have learned it's advantageous to walk on their hind legs at certain times when they feel like it, because they're almost always seen doing both, very often in the same sighting, running on their hind legs or dropping down to all fours. So they can be either one. So there's those, and then there are the other things that seem to be either kind of magical imitations, if that's possible. They're often seen, they're called by different names, skin changers, shapeshifters, that kind of thing. They're often seen near the borders of Native American reserve lands, and they look much more human in their bodies. They have shoulders, which canines do not. They're often quite larger. Their eye shine may be red instead of green. And in a very similar way, there are other things that also, when you see what looks like a giant black wolf standing on the edge of a forest, and then he turns towards you, and you realize it's two-dimensional, and it's almost like looking at the side of a piece of cardboard, and then it turns and trots away, that's no normal animal. And I don't know how to explain these variations other than that we know there are human people. We know we're here. We're solid. We do all the things that humans do. But then there are a lot of people, probably more people who admit to have seen ghosts, which are kind of pasty imitations, although sometimes they look flesh and blood of humans, but they're not humans. So maybe we've got a subset. This is just a guess on my part. Maybe we've got a subset of real mammals that walk on their hind legs when they want to, which is not a supernatural act. Any mammal can do it if motivated. And then somehow it's bringing in these other phantom-like imitations, the same way that human beings have phantoms of them that people see too. That's the only way I can rationalize the differences between them according to what people see and report. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It does. Now, we seem to get a lot of reports of people who act like they see these dogmen, they act scared to death of them as though, they thought they were going to attack and kill them, but yet they don't. They seem very fearsome and ferocious, but at the same time, there's only a few reports of people who even hint or claim that a dogman has killed or hurt or tried to hurt someone.
Right, you're right, exactly. To me, if you just think about natural animals, and I always do try and compare them to natural animals because I feel you have to keep doing that in order to get some better idea of what they are. That's how a territorial animal acts. It will frighten you, try to scare you, because it doesn't want you where you are for some reason. Maybe it's guarding a kill. Maybe it's got a mate that it's trying to protect or young ones. It's hard to say. But I'd say that's probably the easiest. And it's sort of interesting because a lot of the people who say they were terrified, but they were, even though they were safely in their cars at the time, said, it wasn't really so much that I felt it was going to eat me or, jump on me or anything, as it was the realization that I was looking at something that wasn't supposed to be. I mean, nobody knows. And I've talked to wildlife officers and wolf study directors and all that kind of thing, asking them if they've ever seen groups in the wild living and hunting, because, they carry out collared helicopter studies of these things. They're in very close touch with known wolf packs, and this behavior, if it's universal, should show up, in their investigations one of these times, and yet it doesn't. So, and that's part of it. People also say they have this inordinate feeling that the creature that is standing there in the middle of the road staring at them isn't normal because it's looking at them as if it's interested in them. Sometimes they say they'll get feelings from it, not like words in their head, but feelings that it's trying to get across the idea to them that it could get them if it wanted to, but it's better than them. Things that, you guys are probably hunters. I know my husband's a hunter. He's seen a bear at close range while he was in his stand, and he said he did not say that the bear looked at him and he thought the bear was telling him it wanted to get him. That's really an abnormal kind of reaction for a person to have when they see a wild animal. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I've never seen a dog or something that I thought was trying to convey a message to me, You kind of get the idea it don't want you around, but I've never felt like one talked to me.
Right, exactly. And that is what scares people the most, because they think, this is not right. There's something not right about this animal, and I don't know what it is. And that's when even, men who say they're 6'5" and hunted every day of their life, and one he said to me, Linda, in that minute, I was not a man. I was a little girl. And they have various physical reactions I won't go into from it, too. But they can scare people very badly. But in 27 years, the only report I received personally was from a man in Quebec who was on a trail and came face-to-face with a wolf-like creature on its hind legs. And it kind of made a move toward him, and he lunged. And he said he actually didn't think it meant to scratch him, but it went down to all fours, and its mouth was hanging open, and it kind of tore up his side and the shirt with it. And he had to go and he had to leave the trail and go get stitches. And he said he was too embarrassed to tell the people at the hospital what it really was that did it. Although they did agree, so he said it was a bear, and they said, well, it does look compatible with an uneven tooth-like tear here. So that was the only one. Now I am aware that there are some other reported well-known incidents, and they very well could be. It's just that I didn't have a chance ever to investigate them myself, and I've never felt that I had enough knowledge to really comment on them too much, because even we're always told by wildlife officials that mountain lions, for instance, will try and stay away from humans as much as they can. They almost never attack humans, but there's always the one. There've been a few fatal mountain lion human incidents in the past couple of years. One was, I think, a woman hiking. Another one was a man riding his bike, and even bears, which are said not to want to be around humans. There was just something on the news the other night. I can't remember where this occurred, but a bear got into somebody's unlocked garage, and they had it on their security cam inside the house, so they recorded the whole thing. Went straight for the refrigerator, yanked the refrigerator door just about off the hinges, found a big bowl of meat-like stuff. I think it was taco, fried taco or something. And they, of course, slammed the doors in another room and called 911 and had the whole thing on YouTube. So that was a bear acting differently, too. But I believe most animals are very opportunistic, and they'll take what they can get if it's there. So you still have to always treat them with respect. And that's what I say also to people who say, well, what should I do if I do run into one of these things? If it looks like a wolf but it's on its hind legs. And I said, well, since we've never had one to truly examine that I know of, and since we don't know what it is, I would just treat it with the same respect that you'd have for any wild predator, anything that's large enough to, chase and harm you if it desired, because you just never know. There may have been people who never lived to tell the tale, for all we know.
Well, and I'd say the first thing you don't want to do is just try to shoot it.
Exactly. Yeah, and, that actually doesn't work out very well. I've had people telling me, I think this guy was down in Alabama, too. It was in one of my first books. He was out doing catfish fishing from a low flat boat in the shallows. He had his dog on there with him, and he said he looked back on the shore. Pardon?
That's real Wolfman. I love that story.
Oh, yes. Yep, it's in that. Yeah, and he sees this dogman or wolf-like creature standing on its hind legs looking at him, and his dog starts barking. And this is a consistent behavior that I've seen over and over again, that they do not seem to like dogs. They will chase after dogs. They will kill dogs and other pets. And this thing started wading out in the water toward them. And so he he had an automatic weapon and said he emptied his clips on it, and it never fell down. It just turned around and went back into the wood line. And when he looked for it later, he thought he'd find it lying dead. There was nothing there. So, and this is a story that I've seen repeated in different circumstances quite a lot, and in one case there was a man and his wife were on a trail, and there was one standing by the tree line watching them, and the man put up his rifle, and he was hesitating, because he just wasn't sure if he should shoot it or not, and the wife had her cell phone camera and started to hold up the camera, and at that's when he turned and ran away, which was almost like he was more afraid of having his picture taken than being shot at.
That almost would indicate intelligence.
Many people say that. I hear that's another very common thing I hear from people. They feel that it's calculating, that it's planning, that it has more intelligence than a normal animal. And just normal natural wolves are extremely intelligent. Scientists keep finding more and more that they do, that they hunt in certain formations and have plans, to do something if the other one does another thing. They're just very intelligent creatures. And these things, people say, appear to them to be more intelligent than just our natural animals. So,
Elijah, was you going to ask Miss Linda something?
Yes. I was wondering where you fell on the topic of the cynocephali from ancient history.
Yeah, that's always been very interesting. Yeah, Marco Polo and other explorers, when they were studying all the Indies, all the East Indian countries in the ocean over there, and kept landing and meeting what they said were different tribes of people. And the cynocephali were supposed to have dogs' heads, human bodies, and I can't think right offhand of what their hobbies were, but they had some unusual practices, that much I remember. And I have seen that in other places too. China, for one, had a very ancient race that was supposed to have been dogmen that had was the result of a dog uniting with a human, and they still have the dog festival every year, and they do things like the women will put their hair up in like two little dog ears on top of their head, and they will eat roast dog. Different ways of celebrating like that. So there are lots of traditions around the world of this early combination of dogs and people. You can go back again to the ancient Egyptians, and you see the Anubis, which was a combination of a jackal head and a human-like body, and he was one of the gods of the underworld. I think they sometimes call him a god of death. So it's something that's really ingrained in our story and myth, and very common and always there no matter how far you go back. And I don't know if that's just people trying to memorialize the close relationship that man has with canines, or if it means there really was something there. Now, there also there are certain naturally occurring, sometimes mutations, such as the hypertrichosis, which is a gene in the human being that can be switched on, and it's rare, but when it is, you have a human all covered with furry hair. And there's a
like
family...
the Spanish family.
Right, the Gomez, I think they are, the Gomez family. And, yeah, it's a whole family of people who have this gene, and some have it thicker than others. There's a Chinese man, too, who wanted to be called Hair Boy, and I think he had a little rock band. I don't know whatever became of him, but on him it was so thick that he had to have the hair regularly taken out of his ears and his nose, because he would practically suffocate. So you could have had that. Yeah, it was very, very furry looking, but yet he's completely 100% human otherwise. So if this gene is there in these people, it may be latent in all humans, because according to both science and the Bible, all of us humans alive right now came from one rather small group of people. And so you have to assume that gene is there. Maybe there was a whole bunch of people who had married too closely within their families, and this gene was allowed to express itself, and there were a lot of them, and they may have looked like dogs. There are people. If you look, go to the library and look up for books on. They used to call them freaks. That's not a word we use anymore, but I think there is a book with that title. Or there's another book just titled Monsters that is about people who have unusual body formations, and you'll find several really striking photos of people who were very famous in their day for being called the Dogmen, because they had, or Dog Boy, because they were so covered with this fur. So it's possible these creatures which were in the Andaman Islands, maybe that was what made the explorers think that they were actually dog people.
Maybe. That's a good theory on that.
Yeah, it makes more sense to me than anything else, because if you take any species of mammals, and they get very many degrees apart on the family tree, it becomes impossible to mate. Say a human and a dog, they're too different. You can't. Even if you go to the big cats, the ones that are very similar, a lion and a tiger can mate, and they'll have an offspring, but it is usually sterile. They're usually not very bright. Their heads are too big for their bodies, and they're large. There's always a penalty for bringing together unmatching. And then you go a couple steps further, and you get to a mountain lion, and they're not supposed to be able to mate with any of those on the branches above it, and yet they look so similar and they're obviously both big cats. So that's why the
genetic boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why it just makes more sense to me that these very startling fur-covered humans may have struck the explorers as canine people.
Well, I could absolutely see that.
Yeah, so.
And that'd be a good, easy explanation to it too.
Yeah, and there's nothing that says to say that it couldn't. So to me that makes the most sense.
Right. Now, something else I was wanting to ask you about, if you don't mind. In your Real Wolfman book, we've seen an encounter in there, and it comes from our hometown over in Dayton, Tennessee. Do you happen to have any more info on that? Because we just found that just incredibly interesting.
Oh, well, let's see. I don't have the book right in front of me, and I don't always remember. Can you give me a little bit more about the incident? Because I don't always remember exactly what's in the town. Too many books, too much writing.
Oh, I think it was from an article from the 410 Times or something of that nature. A woman was coming home from work, going up Dayton Mountain, Highway 30, up Walden's Ridge, and she passed a wolf man, or it looked like he was wearing clothes. It looked in the window and kind of...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing, when they see these creatures wearing clothes, that does make me stop and wonder. Because if something is, if you're naturally born with claws on all four of your limbs, how are you going to get clothing on? I always try to start with the most practical thing about it, and also, I think he turned and she saw his face and it looked canine. Well, if you want to appear canine, the easiest way for the least amount of money, you can get a mask and cover the rest of your body so they can't see if it's fur or not. But as I recall that one, I'm not sure she even was able to see the legs or the feet, which are, the telling feature. But I've received pictures sometimes where supposedly they were sending me a picture of a werewolf, and it was an obvious mask. One was the same mask as I owned just for fun, that was picked up in a shop somewhere. So I could recognize that. But either they're wearing clothing with a hood, or there was another one where it was crouched in front of a mud hole and covered conveniently with mud. So, you can just see somebody thinking, how can I avoid having to buy a $150 wolf suit? I know, I'll just not show the rest of me. So that's one possibility. It is a possibility if there are creatures that are able to be produced by magical processes, and I don't claim yay or nay on this. I just tell what people have told me on this, and have seen a few things that make me think it could be possible. If you were already dressed in something, and then you could produce the appearance of, not all parts of you changing, but just the appearance of your face or something else, as if projecting something other than your own face, then you could still remain clothed, and that would work out fine. It's really hard to judge something like that, but I just keep thinking, if it were a natural creature that lived in the woods or lived naturally, it shouldn't be wearing clothing. It's just
not at all.
Yeah.
No, I probably can't count on one hand enough to take up all the fingers accounts where I've heard of one wearing clothes.
It's very rare. It really is. There's another one that was reported it was up in Canada somewhere, where they saw like a plaid shirt or something. And I do like to note that when something is seen wearing a plaid shirt, that was something that the late, great John Keel, the investigator who's best known for really getting in there and having boots on the ground in Point Pleasant over the Mothman for several years, he determined that he determined that plaid clothing was often seen. If there was a creature wearing some sort of article of clothing, it would very often be plaid, whether a shirt or something else. And he didn't really have a reason for that. I'm not sure what the reason would be. Maybe it's that, I always say this, the simplest thing is often the best thing. Maybe it's because most of these sightings are seen out in country areas where the flannel plaid shirt is just regular clothing.
Right.
So that would explain that. But not always. You can't say for sure. And it might
or a lot of times they're in cold weather where people wear the flannel.
Right, exactly, yeah. Canada, northern United States, it would be very, very common. So some of these, you can just think about. I had a incident report that came into me, I think it was last week. I mean, I still get these things. Sometimes I average probably one or two a week, except during maybe the coldest parts of the winter. So that's still quite a bit. And some of them I really have to kind of think about and hem and haw before I put it in anything. But it's one of the weirder ones. There were two men, and I'm not going to give the location or anything like that on this one because I'm just getting into it and I need to do a lot more research before I put it out there. But it's not unusual in the weirdness of it. They were driving. It was night. They pulled over on the road because they had to relieve themselves, and some huge brown-furred creature that seemed to have claws on its hands, was what they said, grabbed one of the men that was supposedly over 6 feet tall and weighed like 300 pounds, and grabbed him by the ankles and flipped him up in the air so that it was holding him by the ankles. And neither he or who I would expect was probably screaming by that point, or the other man could see the head because it was hidden in the foliage somehow. So I'm still trying to figure out if this would be possible, physically possible to do. He did. He wasn't dangling him way up. I'm gathering that the man's head and arms were supporting himself down on the ground. But so there's a lot to this one that, and perhaps I didn't even understand it, or they miswrote part of it. So I'm interviewing him this week. But you can see where sometimes really unique reports come in, and I feel like I have to start from the bottom again and just work my way through to figure out if this is something that really did happen.
We got a really unusual call from Glasgow, Kentucky, a man who said that he was driving down an old road. He gave us the name of the road, but said that he seen what looked like a hound dog, or looked like some kind of a hound, crawling across the road, but it had human hands. He said it scared him so bad he just didn't know what to do with it.
That's creepy. Although many witnesses of Dogman say that the hands or the paws were more than paws. They looked like hands with claws in them. So I do hear that quite a bit. Otherwise, I'm not sure what to make of it. Other than that, if I don't know did he tell you whether they had fur on them or not? Because if they didn't have any fur, it might be that it was mange. And if you have the fur removed, if you ever go look at a book of anatomy of mammals and take a look at what the bone structure of a canine is, and you'll see without the fur, they look quite a bit like fingers. Like, it's hard to tell without the cushions of those fur pads. It's surprising how much they do look like hands, except, for the claws. So that might be one explanation, but I don't know. Mange doesn't usually serve as an explanation for most reports. And there was a recent TV show where the producers came to the conclusion that the Beast of Bray Road was a bear with mange, which doesn't make any sense because nobody reported that it was free of hair. Everybody said it was covered with shaggy, dark hair. So
I've even heard the Beast of Bray Road was a wild kangaroo. I mean, people come up with all kind of crazy things.
Yes, yeah.
Anything to discredit it.
Yeah, they just don't fit. They just don't fit the descriptions. So, and to my point of view, if you're not going to believe what the people said about his appearance, well, then why are you going to believe that they saw anything at all?
Yeah, because, people, since people where we work have found out that Elijah and I are, like, into Bigfoot and Dogman and go out and do field research and stuff, you'd be amazed how many people come to us subtly, away from the crowd, They'll laugh and joke with their buddies, but when everybody goes away, they're like, hey, listen, I did see something one time. It looked like this, and they'll start explaining what this creature looked like, or, I was out and I encountered something, and but they're afraid for people to know that they actually saw something.
Exactly. And it's just so universal. And people write to me, too, and say, I left just to be one of the gang, but, knowing what I saw all the time. And that's why a lot of people don't want their names listed, in the books. And I always give them that choice because I figure it's their life and they're right whether they want everybody to know who they are or not. But I think more and more people are feeling safe now saying it because it's been such a popular TV subject lately, and it's so much better known. It doesn't seem so wackadoodle, as it did. I remember back in 91, 92 when I first heard about it, I probably laughed. I think I did laugh because it just seemed crazy to me that anybody would think that. But then when you go and talk to the people and you meet them, and they're individuals, they're not anybody that's colluded on things. They still seem genuinely frightened. They don't want to see it again. They wish they hadn't seen it in many cases. You just can't help but believe somebody like that.
And they come from all walks of life too.
Yes. Yep, that's a great point. They do. I've interviewed people with 2 PhDs, middle-aged women who work in a factory on third shift at night, very elderly people, farmers, somebody from the Milwaukee airport with a very high clearance who encountered one of these creatures 3 different nights because he had to come in these odd night shift times to get the planes out. It's just men, women, you name it. There's no one sort of person. So that's another really great point.
Yeah, I know a lot of people tell us. Go ahead, Lodge.
We had I believe it was, a sheriff's deputy pop?
Yes,
on like
from
the border of West
Virginia.
Virginia.
I'm sorry,
he confirmed to us that. I'm sorry.
No, I couldn't quite hear you. I couldn't quite hear you say what the woman did. Or she was talking to a sheriff's deputy or something. I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear you.
Oh, good. It's a sheriff's deputy that told us that he can confirm that there is some kind of bipedal canid over in the region of West Virginia, border of Virginia area.
Yeah, I believe that there are lots of, especially retired sheriff's deputies, who feel free to speak. I hear quite a bit from them, and some have been threatened. Some feel they would have been just kicked off the force prematurely if they had talked, and they're the ones who are out there in all hours of the night, oftentimes doing their write-ups and reports, parked in some inconspicuous place, and there they are. I knew one that had 3 sightings of dogmen around Racine County, and he and his wife, who was also a sheriff's deputy, both retired early. So they were pretty much affected by that.
Most people that talk to us describe what they see as looking like one of 3 things. Usually they say that it looked like the things from the underworld movies, The Howling, or Van Helsing. Do you hear that?
I do. I hear those same 2 things. Or the other one is the werewolf in the Harry Potter movies.
I've never seen
I heard one like that, actually.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah, I've heard that one quite a bit. But there was a nice drawing that you put, or not a nice cavalcade of my drawings that you put on your website today that I thought was super, by the way. Great job. And one of them has my drawing of what I call the indigenous dogman, which was my kind of forensic sketch of what most people agreed that it looked like and told me. And that's been in a couple of my books, and people still say that's really the thing that it looks the most like, And it's fierce. It's on its hind legs. It's not like super muscled, hyper wrestling guy with a little shirt on and the muscles popping out of it, or anything like that. But it's still pretty scary, and I think would still scare most people.
Yes, ma'am. Now I've got to touch on this with you because I'm sure over the years you've heard about it. Do you have any information on the Beast of LBL?
Not any more than is really printed about it. I know Bart Nunnally, I think, is probably the expert on that people that I know and trust who know about it. And I don't really, again, it's something that I've not been able to contact any primary sources for it, or do my own investigation. So I don't usually say much about it because I just don't know, and I don't want to seem like I do. If I'm not sure about something, I just leave that for people who are maybe more qualified, and I think there are people more qualified to answer that one. But I will say it's unusual. It would be very unusual, and in fact unheard of in the other annals of these stories, for there to be something like that would kill a whole family and leave them there and be that fierce when it doesn't seem there's any other provocation, and when you almost normally never hear of that. And especially since I did have a sighting from a man who had been camping in the LBL. I'm not sure of the exact year right now, but it wasn't eons ago or anything. It was within fairly recent. And he'd been camping in kind of a solitary part of the park with a couple of buddies, and they had to leave, and he was there cleaning up the camp by himself, and took a road out finally when he was done. And he saw some figures in the road ahead of him, and he kind of pulled over and stopped, and it was an upright canine with 3 small ones following her upright, crossing the road. So, and they didn't...
That would actually be kind of cute.
Yeah, exactly. So,
like that.
But it certainly, he wasn't really frightened of it. He felt safe in his car, and he just waited till they got across the road like you would for any animal crossing the road. And I've had other occasional sightings of a larger one with what looked like a young one, or just even a young one by itself in a different place. So, again, that would confirm the presence of them there, but it certainly is really different behavior.
Now, we went back at the beginning of summer to a location where someone had sighted supposedly a dog man down in LBL, and we camped there, and we did get run out of there because we got to blowing a dog whistle, and it sounded like a Tyrannosaurus Rex coming through the woods, tearing trees down toward us. So we thought that might be the best bet for us to leave. We never saw anything, but something did growl at us, and we it did have something coming, like big tearing trees up.
Did you say you saw the eye shine?
We saw a little bit down there. That was blue.
Huh. Well, that would still sound more like the Dogman than anything else. And, I mean, the Dogman can get really big. 7 feet is not an unusual report for their height. And the growling sounds more like the Dogman because that's normally what they do. They have this, people who have heard it and tried to repeat it to me. I've got a little tape recording I made of one of them. It's very unusual, and they all sound the same way. It's kind of like one of those old cappuccino makers where it would grind up and then down in tone, like up and then down, over and over. And
I think I know what you're talking about. But I think maybe the reason we got initially growled at was because there was something with orange-looking eye shine watching us, and we waded across the creek to kind of go look at it, and it was just kind of bobbing and weaving around. We finally figured out that was a raccoon. Well, I've read over and over that these dogmen eat raccoons, and well, when we went over there, we kind of run it off, and I think maybe it was planning, that's what it was planning to make a meal out of this raccoon, and we kind of interloped into its dinner and maybe annoyed it. Then trying to get its attention again, started blowing a dog whistle. It just didn't like it.
Yeah, I imagine it probably hurts its ears. If you think about, I know I've had dogs myself that, if it was a really hard clap of thunder, they'd put their paws over their ears, kind of cross them, on top of their head. You've probably seen dogs doing that. It's kind of comical. Or if there's some other type of high pitch, like the smoke alarm would go off, when we were burning the pizza or whatever, they'd act like it was hurting their ears. So I would think the dog whistles might also hurt their ears, even though they can hear it and we can't. But
yeah, we thought it might have been a good idea because we had been in another area and we was blowing a whistle, and a dog whistle, and we think that there might have been a Bigfoot there that really seemed to enjoy it. It was mimicking the sound back to us, and we was like, oh, it really whatever pitch we'd make, it would pitch, and we.
That sounds like Bigfoot. That does sound like Bigfoot.
We came back a few days later to the same spot, and it started whistling the same pitch that we had been doing the dog whistle earlier in the week.
Oh, wow.
Like it was wanting us to do it again. So we started blowing the whistle again, and it started mimicking again. So it was like, so these different animals like this thing. But apparently if it was a dog, man, it didn't like it.
Yeah, it sounds that way. Yeah, and it just, I mean, who knows how these creatures, how their ears are constructed and the differences between them. We just don't know. But I've just heard a lot of people had dog whistles and they didn't use them because their dogs really didn't like them. So for some reason, most of my friends are dog people rather than cat people.
I love dogs.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're the same way.
So, but no, that's really interesting. Yeah, I've heard a Bigfoot growl at pretty close range, and I know what it was because one person in my party saw it right then. It was just that she was looking the right way, and my other friend and I weren't at the time. And it just set your hair to hackles, on the back of your neck. It was so full and so low in tone. It was almost like infrasound, that deep rumbly thing. And we just left the area immediately at that. That was you've probably seen this, my first interaction with the Bigfoot. And if you don't want to talk about Bigfoot, I don't want to get off on this on a wrong tangent.
Oh, no, that's fine. We talk about any kind of...
anything like that.
Pardon?
We love talking about anything like that.
Oh, okay. Well, and this was it's been in my blog. I put it on my blog back then. and I think it's in one of my books, but it was in 2014, and I was just out walking. I had gone for just on an impulse. We lived at that time really on the very literal edge of the Kettle Moraine State Forest Southern Unit, and I had suspected that. I mean, I'd had reports of them since the very first Dogman reports. People started telling me there are Bigfoots in the Kettle Moraine too, and there was for some reason there was a nice kind of big branch, like maybe an inch in diameter and maybe 5 feet long, and this was an area where a lot of the residents were just weekenders, and they were gone already. It was a Sunday night. It was August. No wind. Had not had any storms or any kind of bad weather lately. And first I thought, well, no one's around. They won't see me if I just go off the trail here. And I tried hitting the tree with a stick. I had really never tried that before. I just had always seemed to me like it probably wouldn't work. But I felt like it, and I did. And I didn't get anything back. And so I tried it again, and I think on the third one, I waited a second, and I was about to throw the stick down and leave, and I got one back from a tree that was maybe 150 feet away from me. And my hand is actually trembling as I'm telling this. And it was a big old living oak tree, so covered with foliage that if whatever was in there, I couldn't see it. And it was growing up from from one of the kettles. And can you guys still hear me? There's some weird noises on the line on my end.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing something bizarre too.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
It's like something's
anyway, I'll just tell this quickly. After a couple of more times, it hit back with something else that I don't know what it was. And then the next thing I know, one of these huge limbs on this oak tree, and mind you, I'm not very far away from it. It was like right in front of me almost. Made a huge cracking sound, and there was a big twist. I could see it was hanging down from a little bit below the other branches. It was hanging down, and then I was panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, maybe if I just hit it once more, that'll divert them, and then I can run. And I hit my tree, and there was another cracking sound from the oak, and this time it was completely twisted. It hadn't been twisted before, but it was twisted, and I could see the clean white wood. I was close enough to see that, and it was dropped down 40 feet down into the bottom of this kettle, this deep impression in the earth. And that was when I knew what it was, because I knew whatever did that had to grasp that branch, which I later measured at 8 feet diameter and 35 feet long. It wasn't like some little branch. This was a big one. Whatever had to have the ability to grasp the wood to get enough torque to twist that thing off of the tree. And so it was in a place where a human couldn't have done that and wouldn't have been there sitting up in that tree for some reason. Anyway, it wasn't a place where people would go down in that. You would have had to get up from behind it or below it. So I just left, but I came back in half an hour with my friend Sandra and her daughter, who was 20 and knew nothing about Bigfoot. And she's the one, because I just had to find out. I thought perhaps woodpeckers were at it, because there are woodpeckers in those woods. I've seen them. And I wanted to make sure it wasn't rotten or woodpeckered or had saw cuts from a human blade. And so that's when we quickly measured it, and the daughter was looking down the other way into another opening, and she screamed, and we ran up there, and she said she had just seen it, and she saw it. She didn't think it could be a Bigfoot because it was like beige and silver in color, and around here they call that a blonde Bigfoot. And I said, no, I've had those reported to me in the Kettle Moraine. She didn't know anything about that. And then we were just kind of peeking around seeing if there was any trace of it, and then that's when it growled, and we heard that sound, and we just left. There's nothing more you can do, because you just know something immense made that sound. Nothing with a small little voice box could have done it. And there are photos. If you go to lindagodfrey.com and just there's a little search bar on top where you can just put in Bigfoot branch. And I've got photos of that branch and how it was twisted, and even the pressure marks from the 9-inch hands where it held on to that branch and then twisted it. So that was the day I knew Bigfoots were real with my gut, and not just, it's different to accept them mentally, but never to have experienced one. And this was like, 20 years after I started really studying these things, so it took me that long to really have that kind of a sighting. And that a lot of people get discouraged because they'll try for a year or maybe some even less and say, well, I'm never going to see it, and give up. But sometimes I think if we're in a place enough, and especially if it's an open place out in the country, and they are there, that they're studying, and they know us before we know them.
That sounds right.
I think
yeah,
so.
I aim to keep going till I see me a dog man.
Well, you're luckier than I am. Do you have that written down? I should go and look at that.
Well, what's that?
But you just said you.
No, I
saw
said I plan to see me a dog man.
Oh, you plan to? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the plan.
Yeah, if I have to, look for it for 10 more years, I'm going to see one eventually.
Yeah, it just takes time and patience, and I think it's ironic.
They supposedly are.
Right, exactly. And it's not like you can expect them to be standing on the same spot, but most large predatory animals have a pretty big range of territory that they cover. And they will leave some sorts of, if you're looking for places where prints can exist, there's a pretty good chance you might, find some clues that it's around yet, or if one has been there. So I do tell people don't
always go up close to water.
Yep, exactly. And I think Bigfoot is pretty much like that too. From just from my own observation.
It must be nice for you to get to do Bigfoot after probably everything everybody tries to send to you is Dogman, to actually get out and do a different cryptid.
Yeah, and it wasn't like I was thinking about Bigfoot that much either. It's just ironic because all that time spent on the Dogman, and when I finally do get to see one, it's a Bigfoot, because I did see one not that far from where the original tree thing was. I did see one 3 different times in the next year, and it was in different fields but the same area, and each time it was placed differently and doing something differently, but it was always daylight and I could see it pretty well. So that's a shock too. But I always say, if I were going to pick one animal, say if I were going to make it up, of course it would be a lot better for me if I made up that it was a Dogman. But and I didn't tell anybody about it really, or publish anything about it for a long time. In fact, the sightings of this one is finally in the book that just came out this last month in July. I told about it because the more I thought about, I thought people would say, well, sure, it's really convenient for her to see these things because she writes the books. But on the other hand, I knew I saw it, and I felt bad asking other people to tell their stories if I was too chicken to tell mine. And I finally got to feel like if I said I didn't see it, I would be lying because I saw it, just like the title of my book, I know what I saw. And so that's in there. And
is that the new book?
Yeah, that's the new book. It's called I Know What I Saw, Modern Day Encounters with Monsters of New Urban Legend and Ancient Lore.
My daughter was telling me about it. She's pretty excited that you had a new book. I don't know if she knew it was out yet or it was coming out.
Yeah, just last month, July 16th was the release date. So, and you can see pictures of it linked. Yeah, it's available everywhere. In fact, if you want to do a show with us, I can send you the publisher that you can send for it to do the show, and they'll send you a copy.
Well, yeah, we'd love to do that sometime.
Sure.
But yeah, we love your books.
So, well, thank you. I really appreciate it. That's very kind of you.
I guess we aim to try to have all of them at some point. I think collectively we got 4 or 5 of them now. How many books do you have out?
I think this last one makes it 18 published ones.
Oh, goodness.
That is incredible.
Yeah, they're not all strictly on the Wolfman. There was I did the co-authored the Weird Wisconsin book for Barnes and Noble, and then did the Weird Michigan book, which were both very rich in Bigfoot and Wolfman lore, both of those. And then I did sequels to those. There's another set. There's a book called Werewolves, and another one, Lake and Sea Monsters, and then Mythical Creatures, which I did for a publisher in New York that are meant more for like junior high age kids. They aren't usually seen as much. But and then there's a whole row. If you go to lindagodfrey.com in the About section, there's a list of my published books, and a couple of them are out of print already, but you can find most of them on the used books on eBay too. So.
Well, that would almost make you the most prolific cryptid writer out there, wouldn't it?
No, I don't think I can beat Nick Redfern, for one. We kind of tease him. He's about being a book factory. He's able to really research quickly and just has a very great knowledge and is able to churn them out a little faster than I can. And he's got a lot of very good books.
Nick Redfern. Oh, we need to look up some of his books.
His too.
My favorite of his is a slightly older one. It's called 3 Men Seeking Monsters.
3 Men Seeking Monsters. Now, time is getting away from us, and we won't hold you much longer. We're so grateful that you come on for this hour with us. But do you ever get reports of something that people call a rake?
Yeah. In fact, this new book I've got it's kind of related to the stick people and the Hat Man and the Shadow people. And I don't go real deeply into this other than to cite some examples I know of native lore and a couple of other things. But it seems like these sightings are getting more and more common, either the things that look like black silhouettes or that look like they're too impossibly skinny to walk, like stick figures almost. So, these are things that were very little known even just a few years ago, and now there's a lot more about them. There's a book out called The Shadow People. Shadow People is the title of it, and there are several others that you can find that just address those topics. But they all kind of get back to those same very ancient stories that you can find all around the globe, and it's kind of like we all have these in our heritage, and at one time, they just started, and we don't really know why.
Well, that book sounds very interesting.
So yeah, this was a book that took me a really long time to get out. Most of them, I can do 1 in a year or 2 in a year, but this one book took me 3 years because it was just more complicated to research, and there were a lot of really unusual reports that I also spent more time confirming and researching and that kind of thing to be sure they should go in the book, because I was looking for things that really were reminiscent of ancient myth or these newer urban legends like the rake or whatever. And so there are some in there that wouldn't ordinarily have been in my book, but because they had relations to this topic of these other new contemporary creatures, trying to see if there were any associations, it just took me a lot longer.
Well, I like the fact that you actually research what people tell you. You try to investigate it and not just say, well, somebody told me this and make a book out of it.
Right, yeah, that would never interest me. And I do go out and do field research whenever I can. That's really one of my favorite things. In fact, I have a little one set up for this week, because I like to go and do recon either on areas where people have made recent reports, or just to check what's new in certain areas where there has been activity, because sometimes things start up and other people don't always catch it. So it'd be nice. I wish there were the good old days when there used to be some explorers and investigators who would get financed by people and could just fly all over the world wherever they heard of a sighting. And I'm not in that league by any means, but I do like to get out whenever I can get to a place, and that's one of the great joys of this work, I think, and you probably do think the same, I would assume.
Yes, it's very relaxing
right,
for us. It sounds crazy to be relaxing to do that, but we put up with so much at work. It's our enjoyment time getting out to go do that.
Exactly.
Now, if you have any interest, next year we've rented a whole summer camp for 5 days, where they filmed Ernest Goes to Camp. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
Oh,
but,
yeah, I think I did once.
We rented that whole camp down in Dixon, Tennessee. We're going to have like a 5-day Crypticon, and if you have any interest in going, we'll actually give you a cabin for the 5 days or however long you want to do. If you want to go down and do research, you're close to Werewolf Springs, you're close to LBL. So if you have any interest, just let us know, and we'll set you a place aside.
Thank you. That sounds great. Sure. If you just send me a little note on that, that would be wonderful. I would appreciate that.
Well, we'll make sure we do that.
The summer camp's actually in one big research area, so you can just about go anywhere.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, because there's allegedly a Dogman on one side of the park, and we saw a Sasquatch on the other side. So,
oh wow,
there's plenty to
yes, I would say
research.
I would say that's promising. A very
yes,
promising
ma'am. Well, we'll
place.
send you information on it.
Thank you so much. Wow, it's a fantastic place to go. So I don't know if there are any other questions that you had.
No, ma'am. I think you've covered everything. We again just so grateful that you were willing to grace us with coming on our show, and we just have the highest respect for you, and really loved meeting you up there in Lexington.
That was a great place. I missed being there this year. I really did. I had so much fun there, and it was so well done. Really great event.
Yeah, it was in Frankfurt last year. They're putting it in Lexington this year. They seem to think it's going to be a better environment, so I hope so. We've actually going to set up a table this year.
Great. Sounds wonderful. Wow. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really, really do appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
No, we appreciate you, ma'am.
So
we are grateful for everything you've done, all the research, the books. You've certainly kept us entertained with these books. I keep mine beside my bed, and I read myself to sleep with it most nights.
Wow, you're a brave guy. A lot of people tell me they won't even read it with their back to the window. At least this one that I just wrote.
I just have a thick obsession with Dogman, so I love it.
That's good. Well, it never ceases to amaze me. I'll put it that way. There's always something new. I do have. I'll just give you one hint. In the new one, I tackled finally these super big canines that don't necessarily walk on their hind feet, but people describe them as the size of a bull calf or a Shetland pony, and they're huge. And I've got a whole chapter on those. I think a lot of people have been interested. I call them dire dogs because they're as big or bigger than dire wolves, but they're not really. Most of them don't look like wolves. They seem to have more dog in them. Maybe wolf-like.
Would
partly.
they be like a? I'm sorry. Would they be like those things that a shunk of working, what the Indians called a carries
something
off
like
dog?
That, yeah, or the wahila. That's what they sound like. But they're supposed to be extinct. But you never know. In all the land that's in Canada and Alaska, to me, it wouldn't be surprising if those animals somewhere had a small surviving members of their family that have continued on and maybe been able to prosper lately. and be seen more often, because there are a lot of them, and they bump people's cars, try and run them into the ditch. Usually their shoulders come up to where the bottom of the driver's seat window would be, and then their head is still up above that, and they keep pace with the car. So I've got a whole chapter and examples of those that people haven't seen before in this book. But yeah, we'll just get you a copy from the publisher. So
well, I look forward to reading the book.
Sounds great.
All righty, ma'am. Well, we'll let you go, and we again thank you so very much. Hope to bump paths with you time.
And thanks to all your listeners too. I really appreciate their time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Well, Elijah, that was a great, great interview.
That was absolutely great. I love that.
I'm sure you did. Well, Elijah, it's time to finish up for the night and get ready for work in the morning. In closing, do you have anything else to say?
No, I reckon not. I reckon I'm good for now. Just for everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you to Miss Linda Godfrey, and everybody have a good night.
I concur, and until next time, stay groovy, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.